Grok Talk comes to you live almost every Saturday morning from 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern Time on New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, granitegrok.com. You can also listen live at Spreaker.com. If you missed a live show, catch up with the podcast at granitegrok.com, Spreaker.com, on Stitcher Radio, at iTunes, TuneIn, or iHeartRadio, and now on The Rock, New Hampshire's Christian radio station, The Rock, NHCR.com. Grok Talk is a mobile-ready broadcast, so you can listen anywhere, anytime, on your PC, laptop, tablet, or smartphone.
Grok Talk. Grok Talk.
Welcome back to Grok Talk. We are talking to Gerard at Large's humble host, Rich Gerard, who's joined us today.
With the never humble opinion.
With the never humble opinion, because you can't have one if you want anybody to listen to you. I was thinking, you started to get to the civics part, and I was thinking, the one standardized assessment they should be forced to take, and that should affect whether or not students are allowed to pass, is the citizenship test.
Yep.
They should all have to take that. And I don't care if you're talking 3rd grade, 5th grade, 7th grade. I mean, we make fun of this because it's funny how bad things are, but in the 50s, everybody knew who was on the cabinet. They knew stuff that you ask a college graduate and they're like, Walking Dead. Yeah. It's embarrassing.
I post those kinds of videos all the time. I got another one queued up, ready to post up. We don't know our history. We don't know our Constitution. And then we wonder why this country's going to hell in a handbasket.
But that's intentional that we don't know these things.
And I've been saying that for years. That is absolutely intentional.
Of course it is.
That if you don't know your history, then anything sounds good.
Right.
And
including Bernie Sanders.
Well, yeah. I mean, we are teaching our kids to feel, not to think. If all of the teachers, as I told during Max's segment,
Syndrome.
Listen to this.
Good movie.
I have a close family friend who is going to get her special ed degree. Mm-hmm. She is being taught, don't trust the parents.
Of course not. We're too stupid to understand our own children and their needs.
Well, not only that, but then you look at some of this stuff of, our founders were nothing but slave owners. We're seeing the result of that in our school systems. Mm-hmm. And just because today's hypocrisy of our social justice warriors from the leftist socialists are basically trying to wipe that out, and then we wonder why we can't get anything done.
All you need to do is read one book about that, and it's, is it David Barton, The Jefferson Lies?
Yes.
The book is The Jefferson Lies. I believe it's by David Barton. Fantastic book, which will dispel the idea that Jefferson or any of them were evil slave owners, among other things. I mean, yes, some of them owned slaves, but it's not like... Well, in the book, Barton basically says Jefferson couldn't free his slaves. It was against Virginia law.
Yeah. I mean, they talk about Republicans and Jim Crow. Mm-hmm. Most of those were still down in the South by Democrat lawmakers.
Of course.
But again, that's the kind of history.
Well,
I mean, if they talk about the bad things here, you got to talk about the bad things over here as well. And they won't do it. It is all, like you said, can they add?
Well, I'm going to pick up on something that you said, Skip, and take it a step further. They're not being taught to feel. We all have feelings. I mean, we all feel things. What they're doing is they're doing two things. They're not teaching kids to develop their ability to reason and be intellectual, so their ability to reason and use their intellect to override their feelings when necessary and appropriate can be done. So they're disabling the intellectual ability that we as human beings need to develop if we are to govern our passions and feelings rather than be governed by them. They are basically boiling us down to our animal instinct, if I can put it that way.
Yeah.
And I see that as problematic.
I was doing a little bit of history research. The Democrats to this day continue saying, well, those Southern conservative Democrats moved over to the Republican Party in the 60s and 70s and so forth. And that isn't true. When you actually go through the list of these really prominent white supremacists and KKK members and Robert Byrd, Democratic senator from West Virginia, if you look at them, they stay in the Democratic Party. When the Republicans campaigned down south and out west and some of the areas, a little hotbeds of discrimination, they were very careful to only bring over basically, real conservatives, people who were not racist at all. The problems came up when they brought up affirmative action. During the affirmative action era, Democrats were really heavy on giving special preferences to disadvantaged minorities. They kept extending it to gays and lesbians, and then they extended it to women, and so on and so forth, so that eventually, under the affirmative action era, everyone who was in a victim class, which could be just about anyone, 90% of the population, call themselves...
Except me.
Right, you're totally not the right guy.
You're an old white Irishman. You have no chance.
Swedish, thank you.
Swedish, sorry.
Let me build upon that and what you just said, because we've got this social justice warrior mentality that's now floated into the schools. But you brought up an important point, the fundamental building blocks. For instance, I help people with software. And when things go bump in the night or worse, bump in the day when the president comes into your office and says, why isn't this working? And to be able to do that kind of stuff, you need those little fundamental blocks, and you have to build on them, sometimes for years, to get to the point where somebody says, well, this is what's gone wrong, and you go,
Of course.
mentally, I string 10, 15 blocks together and go, I know exactly what the problem is. Go check that.
Right.
What you're saying is that we have to be doing the same thing in school at a more basic level, but creating those little fundamental blocks.
Well, of
How
course.
are you, when you go on the board of school members or whatever the heck the name is,
School board.
We'll just call it the school board.
what is it that you would bring to the table that the current folks can't to get that to happen?
Let me give you an example. I was sent a clip of a community television show in Manchester that is hosted by a school board member, and that the superintendent and the assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction appeared on. During that, in that clip, it was the assistant superintendent announcing that the City of Manchester schools were going to have new elementary math curriculum.
Again?
Something called Envision and something called My Math, if I remember correctly. And now I watched the school board pretty closely. And I'm not saying, I'm a pretty good goalie, but even the best goalie is going to let, a puck get by. So maybe I missed this. But I don't recall a meeting of the Curriculum and Instruction Committee, and I don't recall a meeting of the school board where there was any kind of discussion about the new math curriculum and the merits of the new math curriculum versus the old one. And here are the working committees that did their evaluations. Here's where the parents were involved or included. And here's why we're recommending this committee and the school board adopt this new curriculum so that we can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and, once again, go out and buy a bunch of new books. So to answer your question, I think what we need to do, and it feeds into my overall mission in running, is involve the public and involve the board in decisions that it should be making before these things are done. So how will I do that? I think I'll do that by asking what we're using, how did it get there, what process did it go through, and like I did on the radio show, you know why Manchester took up any discussion at all about Common Core, which ultimately led to the Manchester Academic Standards, which is a story all unto itself because it turned out to be Manchester's rewrite of Common Core, was because I grabbed people like the mayor and the chairman of the Curriculum and Instruction Committee and others, and I said, well, we keep hearing that these are voluntary standards and that they're not mandates. When has the Board of School Committee ever had a discussion about whether or not these standards should be adopted, and why are we letting the administration go forward with implementing something you guys have never discussed? So I think you have to force the conversations, Skip, and be able to bring the attention that comes with slowing down the process. But you have to understand something about government, especially schools. Okay? I want to make this. I think this is a fundamental point, because I used to be one of those guys who was angry at the slow pace of government. Why can't government work more like a business? Blah, blah, blah. Well, there are certain aspects of government that should be more like a business. The efficient operation of your highway department should be along business principles. Okay? But gee, if you're a community and you're going to contemplate whether or not you want to adopt the complete streets program or the sustainable development model of this, that, or the other thing, That is not something that should be rammed through a governing body because businesses like to do things quickly, and a business wouldn't linger on all this stuff. No. There's a process that needs to be gone through. There's a public that needs to buy in. There's a public that's going to pay the bill, and there's a public that's going to, suffer the benefits or the consequences of the decision of the governing body. And I think whenever you open up the process, and it's a proper process, and people aren't simply limited to the 2 or 3 minutes they're given before their governing body, where you'll have committees that will hold hearings and take the expert testimony and actually listen to the public, even if they just happen to be dopey housewives or concerned husbands or fathers. You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of the shortcomings of what is being done or what could be done, and a lot of opportunities that otherwise would be unknown, will come forward. And the public process is one where the public input needs to be given a fair opportunity to be heard and an honest consideration.
You're absolutely right on that. The due process. Government, to be open and transparent, has to have a process that's open
that everybody can follow.
Correct.
It's got to be you've got to be able to follow it from A to B.
Yeah. Here, I'm going to go you one further though. We see this wholesale take out and plug back in of something totally different,
Mm-hmm.
and like you said, nobody can tell you does it work or not.
Right.
And I just don't understand why more school boards just don't say, well, we don't have to change for the sake of change because you tell us to change.
Right.
How about you do a couple of tests? We have our our baseline folks. We're going to take a couple of the classrooms. They're going to stay that way. Then if you want, bring in another classroom and try this thing. Right. Let's try it for 2, 3, 4 years and then assess which way is better. Yes, some people may not, if this is better, they get left behind a little bit. But if this is a disaster, then you lessen the harm to the whole. But at least then you can objectively. I come from a manufacturing background. This is what you do. You just don't switch. You take a baseline, you get your measurements, your metrics, and you say, this is what we're going to test for. Now we do a small-scale experiment. Is this more value add? And I don't see anything like that happening in education. It's all, I got this new theory. Let's put it nationwide.
Well, a lot of this, though, you have to understand, and this is a local control issue. A lot of this happens because the federal government comes up with something like Race to the Top or No Child Left Behind or, America 2000 or Goals 2000. I mean, there's been any number of federal initiatives. And what
performance-based education, outcome-based education.
Outcome-based, yeah.
Well, the outcome-based education.
Refuse the money.
Well, and the only time that's ever been done was Ovid Lamontagne when he was chairman of the State Board of Education. But here's the thing. The mindset is, and we're going through this fight in Manchester, and I've got a big bullseye painted on my back because I'll stand up and I'll say, well, wait a minute, what's your evidence that more money will fix the problem? Where's your evidence of when the schools have been more funded in a manner that you like, that there was proof of what you say was going to happen? So I don't concede the premise.
We got about a minute.
Okay, I don't concede the premise that the only difference between where we are now and superior schools is spending more money. I think we need to take a good, hardcore look at what we're doing, how we're doing it, and come up with ways that we believe it would best be done before we enter into the discussion of whether or not we're quote-unquote under-resourced. And that's going to take time. And what people need to understand is if you change the way you do something in education, it's not, we're going to try it for a year or two. You have to be committed to it for a 6, 8, 12-year period of time because that's the way it works.
We're out of time. How do people reach you?
They reach me at gerardatlarge.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming down and talking to us.
Gentlemen, appreciate the opportunity.
All right. This is Grog Talk, and I can turn that back on for a minute so you can say goodbye to our lovely listeners. We'll be back next week, and I don't know who our guests are yet. I never really know. I kind of do this on Friday sometimes. That's just the way it works. But thanks again to everybody who came in today. Max, of course, Shona Holmes, and Rich Gerard, and we will be back next week with somebody. But in October, we're on remotes, so don't forget. We're going to be on the road at a bunch of events for October, and we'll get back to that later. We'll post it up online, and that's the end of this. We're going. Goodbye. See ya. Have a nice day. What are you looking at me like that for?
Gremlins on the road.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
The opinions expressed on this program are those of the speakers and not necessarily those of CNHT, GraniteGrock.com, this station, or anyone else for that matter.